Hi, I'm Judson Van Wyk. I'm the Director of College Ministry at Church of the Redeemer.
And I'm Lena Van Wyk, and I founded the farm ministry here at Redeemer. And we have two little girls, Lily, who's 2, and Junia, who's 11 months. And we're going to tell you a little bit of our testimony of God's glory and His working through His church in the life of our littlest girl, Junia, and in our long medical journey through her pregnancy and birth.
So last October, we went in for our routine 19-week ultrasound and received the incredibly hard news that our little girl had a pretty severe medical condition called spina bifida. It's essentially an opening in the spinal column that didn't fuse together that has to be surgically closed. And they told us that one way to receive the surgery that has better outcomes that they recommended was to actually pursue this surgery for Junia in utero while she was still in the womb.
So we prayed for the Lord's guidance in discerning about the surgery, and one of the miracles from the very beginning is that He sent us Dr. Ryan Antiel, who is a pediatric surgeon at Duke, also a fellow Anglican and goes to All Saints. And he knew a lot about not only the ethics of fetal surgery from a Christian perspective, but he had been on the fetal surgery team that did these surgeries at one of the founding institutions, CHOP in Philadelphia. And so he helped us discern that this surgery was right for us and would be worth it for all the benefits it would give Junia in her life. And so we decided to do this. And he set us up with a team of surgeons that he really trusted in Minnesota. So we set out from Minnesota to the Children's Hospital in Minnesota to do this surgery. We only had a couple of weeks of discernment, and then we were heading off.
And so as we launched off, Redeemer just came around us. When people, our friends and brothers and sisters found out the news, they rallied around us in unbelievable ways, showered us in prayer, sent us meals, and commissioned us in prayer at a Sunday service right before we left and sent us out on the road.
Also, Redeemer friends and friends throughout our lives, believers and non-believers, financially donated to us because we anticipated really large medical bills, and that has financially carried us through this year and beyond in ways that is more of a blessing than we can even name.
We actually hit our GoFundMe goal that we were trying to raise to cover these expenses the night before we left for Minnesota, which was pretty wild.
Every step of the way, it felt like the Lord had appointed people. In Indiana, on the first night, we stayed with Sarah and Jason Dickey, our good friends from Redeemer, who had moved to Indiana to start a farm. And they just prayed for us and sent us out from their farm to the second half of our journey to Minnesota. And then we were received, once arriving in Minneapolis, by the Church of the Cross, our sister Anglican Church. And they hosted us for a week, Molly and Christian Ruck, at their home, and prayed for us in the week before surgery. And also their whole church in their service prayed for us going into surgery.
And so November 15th, we went into Minnesota Children's Hospital, and Lena and Junia underwent the surgery to fix Junia's spine. And that was an absolutely surreal and terrifying day in so many ways. After they went in, I was sitting there in the hospital room alone for 5 hours, praying and waiting and sort of an anxious wreck. But even there, we felt unbelievably surrounded by our Redeemer and church community. I had a stack of note cards from friends at Redeemer of prayers and encouragements and scriptures that I just read through again and again and again to just calm my heart. Received encouraging text messages during that time, and Jenny Noyes texted me. She's the director of New Wineskin's Missionary Network, and she asked if we had any very specific prayer requests during the surgery. Well, I just heard from one of the nurses that the surgeon was about to make a big decision about which direction to take the surgery. There's a couple different ways they can do it. And so I asked Jenny, have folks pray for this decision. Help him to make a wise decision that's free of ego, that is just the right thing to do for Lena and our baby. Fast forward a couple hours, and the surgeon comes into the room and tells me the surgery was successful and it went well, and that Lena and Junia were safe and healthy and recovering, and they did all that they needed to do, and that they felt really good about it. And that was just an unbelievable weight off, because there were plenty of risks and things that could have gone wrong. But then he told me that partway through the surgery, they had to make a big decision, and he had felt, as he described it, a presence in the room that was more than he could describe, that felt like he was being led and guided to make the decision that he needed to make. And he literally used the words, "and to set aside my own ego in order to do the right thing in the surgery." Exactly what we had asked this prayer team to pray for. And so that was just one of many unbelievably miraculous ways that God answered our prayers and listened to the prayers of the church. And so they told us we'd be in the hospital for 3 to 4 days before Lena would be released.
In those subsequent days in the hospital, I got a very strange complication. At no fault of the surgeons, it was just a really bizarre and rare complication, either to anesthesia or to the surgery itself. And my body started to be in excruciating amounts of abdominal pain, really for the next 3 months. But it was particularly awful in the hospital. And in that time, the Lord sent this nurse who was a believer. As my body started to get sicker and sicker and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on, she laid her hands on me and just prayed for me. And really it was the laying on of hands that got me through that whole hospital stay. She and so many friends, through encouragement, and Judson through his love of me, and my mom and my father and my in-laws, just so many laying on of hands that got me through bodily suffering. And after we got out of the hospital, finally, we were given a house by a Christian school up in Minneapolis to convalescent. And the 3 weeks we stayed there were, even though they were some of the worst pain in my life, I could still feel an angelic presence in that house. And though it felt like we never would get home, finally they gave us the green light to head back to North Carolina.
We were so longing to be back with our family and our friends again. And it was just, oh my goodness, we were never more thankful for the gift of home and family, I think, than we were when we got home.
The next 6 weeks for me were really sort of a long psalm-like crying out to God and wrestling with God, because the pain wasn't getting any better, and doctors weren't really able to help me, and I didn't know if the pain would continue after she was here. And I remember saying, "Lord, I can't be in excruciating pain and have a child with disabilities, and why are you asking me to do this?" And just really wrestling with what this meant for our lives. And it was people who held hope for me in that season that got me through, because I was in a really dark place. I learned that pain and suffering really messes with you emotionally. In the midst of this pain and this trial, we were attending the Advent services and Christmas services at Redeemer, and I've never felt closer to the Lord or closer to the story of Mary's pregnancy than last year. And I remember particularly just in the services being held by the prayer team, just so compassionately prayed for us, and then also blessed by the worship team, thinking about the Christmas Eve service last year, and Anna Cox and Amelia sang "Breath of Heaven" by Amy Grant, and the line is, "Breath of heaven, hold me together." And I just sat in the back of the church and wept, and I hadn't been able to cry. My body was so stuck in fight and flight mode that I couldn't cry, even though I was so scared and in such depths of emotion. I had no tears, and finally, when they sang that song, I could cry. And I just wept for my baby and for this pregnancy, and just wept thinking about the vulnerability of Mary's pregnancy and how she models what it is to say yes to God even when it's hard.
So after 2 months of just extreme struggle, even at home, Lena's water broke on January 19th, which also happens to be Lena's birthday.
Yes.
She had a spa day planned with her friend Carrie for that day and had to cancel it because we went to the hospital at Duke. And that morning, by emergency C-section, Junia was born. And I mean, speaking of surreal again, after all of the journey and all of the suffering and trial that we had gone through to come to this moment, to finally see our little girl in the flesh was an unbelievable moment.
Because we'd probably had 100 ultrasounds where we'd seen
Yeah.
images of her.
So many ultrasounds, and to see her in actual color was an amazing, amazing thing.
And it was the best birthday present God could have given me, because he gave me this precious child on my birthday, but then also it was the C-section and getting off medication and not being pregnant anymore that finally allowed my body to heal. And so it was a really sweet birthday gift from the Lord.
The nurse handed her to us to hold and told us that she had never been able to hand a child with spina bifida to her parents on the day that she was born before. But because she'd had the surgery a couple of months previously, her back was well enough for us to be able to hold her. And so we had a nurse in tears there, and that was an unbelievable experience as well. And so the birth really gave birth to what became a season of healing, as you're saying, for us. Even being in the NICU and being in the hospital for the next month, it was a place of recovery and a place of rest and healing that we had not had since the surgery in November. And once again, the church rallied around us in incredible ways. Bishop Allen came to see us, prayed over us. Our old church, All Saints Church in Durham, sent Ross Wagner, who was a former professor of ours and clergy member there, who brought us communion. The prayers and the messages of encouragement just came without end until finally, end of February, we were able to finally come home with our little girl.
Yes. And finally be united again as a family with Lily and Junia and Judson and I all together in the same house, which we'd taken for granted before, but was just an amazing gift. And really the whole year we have continued to be held by the church and held by his people as we've healed, because coming home we still had to process everything that we'd been through. I had to go through 12 weeks of intense trauma therapy, and the Lord was right there with me. Lori Miller would come and hold Junia while I would do my trauma therapy, and she has been just an incredible rock for us. We could list all the amazing friends that have been rocks for us this year at Redeemer, who really helped normalize life again. After you've been through a trauma like that, everything feels wobbly, and Redeemer and the community of our church have helped build that solid foundation for us again. And it's been a year of healing in so many ways.
Junia Faith Van Wyk, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I baptize you.
I just look back and think about the hundreds of lives that have touched ours through this experience. It's just a beautiful web of weaving of support that without which I don't know how we would have done this. And I think about only a third of babies with spina bifida reach birth. 2/3 of pregnancies with fetuses of spina bifida are aborted, and a lot of people feel like they couldn't handle this diagnosis, because it's a challenge to have a child with spina bifida. There's highly medically complex disability, but we love the vision of hope that our church has given us and our family has given us, that with support and with the support of the Lord, this burden has been made light for us. And since her birth, there's just been so much joy. The joy of having her eclipse all struggle. And I couldn't imagine a world without Junia. And I just pray that the church continues to come around families so that all babies that get this diagnosis of spina bifida will get a chance at life, because her life is a beautiful and anointed thing.
Yeah.